welcome back to another SphereCast. I am once again joined by
Kaiser Dragon,
Jessikyaa,
and today we will be discussing Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, the movie, if anybody's familiar with that. It has been out for quite a while, so there might be some viewers that aren't familiar with it. If you aren't, go off and watch it, it's quite enjoyable. But we mentioned in a previous podcast, and we mentioned it's sort of the sequel done well. However, we're all unified in the idea that it wasn't that great. It had its flaws, and in some ways major flaws. But even then, it doesn't change the fact that it's a sequel done great. And this is something that we wanted. We thought it was worth, carrying this on, looking into this a bit more. So that's what we'll be doing today. So if we're going to get things started, let's start with the first question of what are your thoughts on Advent Children, the two of you, or the three of us really, both as a movie and as a sequel. So we can take it as two separate questions. What do you think of it as a movie, and then what do you think of it as a sequel? And I think it's right that we start. What did you think of it as a sequel?
I personally think as a sequel, there was no denying it was a great film as a sequel to Final Fantasy VII. But if you were looking at it as a standalone movie, then still good in its own right. It was definitely, you could see it definitely has more flaws to it. If you so it all really goes on your point of view, how you approach the film.
Yeah, I thought it was a good movie, but I only really understood what was going on properly until I played the game, so it works better as a sequel rather than standing alone on its own two feet.
I think as a sequel, especially for Final Fantasy VII, it did a brilliant job, and it did it the way we wanted to see it done. It wasn't perfect even as a sequel, but in the sense that was the sequel that we were going to get. Nobody that I know is willing to complain about it. It did exactly what we hoped it would do. It did it in a nice package. But as a movie itself, it does have a lot of major flaws. And even as sort of a movie of a Final Fantasy nature, continuing Final Fantasy VII, the story has some major flaws even as a Final Fantasy fan. But it's sort of, I was using the analogy earlier, it's sort of like having a limo with a lot of features that are all broken and rusted. If you just want to get to a friend's house, it does exactly what you want to do. You're not going to complain about having this limo.
No, but other people might complain that you'd have a limo.
But it's the second you try and look at it as a limo, then you can say, yeah, it's all falling apart. And this is a situation. We wanted something that carried on the story of Final Fantasy. We wanted a bit more. And in that respect, it got us exactly what we wanted to get. As a sequel, it did a really nice job. But then when you look at it as what it is, you start to see a lot of these flaws, a lot of these issues.
To be fair, Square Enix, I think, actually did sort of see this coming, because on the DVD, every DVD copy you have this, on the special features, they have this Remnants of Final Fantasy VII feature, which, albeit badly, it tries to explain some of the key events of Final Fantasy VII. So I suppose it's either a refreshers for those who have played it and just want to recap about what happens. Oh yeah, that happened here and blah blah blah, or maybe just for newcomers to try and explain what is the backstory of this film. But again, when I tried watching it, it was very poorly done. They could have handled that much better if they did an actual a short kind of in the same style as Advent Children was in the CGI film adaptation of that, and actually have them talking and explaining what is going on, recreating those events in that sort of form. That could have been handled much better, and it probably would have caused less confusion to newcomers.
Yeah, that reminds me of what Jess was saying before we started recording about this, was that you were saying that it was a bit difficult for you to follow what was happening because you didn't know the past. And in some senses that makes it a really good sequel, because those that are in the know understand everything. But as a movie, it does fall short.
It's definitely a film that you could tell was made purely for the fans, which I usually would commend them for. That's a good move. But when you do approach it that way, you've got to also try to
cater for those.
Yeah.
So continuing on, this is something that you wanted to bring up, is the question of what are your thoughts on the medium, using CGI to portray this story. Do you think it was a good call? What are your thoughts on this?
I personally think it's a good move. It was certainly a risky one because you never at the time you didn't really see like big CGI based films. You know, you would think, you know, at first glance when you think that Square Enix were going to do that, you'd think they were going to go for more traditional like cell shaded animation that you most commonly see. But so to do a CGI film was quite a different approach and a rather unique one at that because it does. I think it does work in a lot of areas, but there are definitely some cases where you look at it and you think, good, but you could tell it would look much better if it was cell shaded. So, but on the overall, I think it did well enough, and even today it still holds up pretty well.
What did you think, Jessica? You tend to represent sort of the more younger crowd because me and Held Kaiser were much more the sort of the old guard as such on a lot of these things. But as the younger crowd, was there any issue seeing it in CGI? Did that have any effect on you?
It was quite good actually. It was very, very good, graphically wise as well.
Even these young'uns know a good film.
From time to time. Now, if only us old guard didn't paddle the original Final Fantasy film, we might have had a few more of these. But
No, it was quite nice the way they did it. It helps make it dramatic, which is, I guess, what it was meant to be. That Final Fantasy VII is dramatic, and maybe if they did it cel shaded, might not have carried the same impressiveness. Maybe, especially with what they were trying to pull off.
Yeah. I do think cell shading always has a problem of it's very difficult to create a dark setting. Not like an evil setting. You can create that if you want to make blackness, that's fine. But if you just want to make a gloomy setting, or sort of, you know, Final Fantasy does a lot of that ethereal sort of setting, where it's all like blue colours on like nighttime moonlight colours and stuff. Cell shading doesn't tend to represent that as well.
No.
So the anime style doesn't tend to pull that off as well. But the CGI pulled it off perfectly. You were able to get the full feeling of a lot of these water effects.
I always find it as it's really a debate between CGI and traditional cell shaded animation. It's always like cell shaded. You got their animation is a lot more full of life, but CGI with that kind of animation, it's a lot more realistic. You know, what do you see? What would you like to see in these types of films? You know, much more life or just much more realism.
Yeah. So definitely in the case of Final Fantasy, I think it paid off being in CGI.
Yeah.
They were able to portray more of that sort of post cataclysm darkness that was happening, which is definitely what they were trying to go with the storyline. So for the storyline they were trying to tell, it
definitely worked with what they were aiming for.
Yeah. So then the next question to ponder over, to argue over, and probably quite a bit on this particular question is, what do you think of the new characters? Because they introduced 3 new characters mainly, and these were all sort of... They're essentially Sephiroth's brothers, essentially. They look and they feel a lot like Sephiroth. So what do you think about it? We'll start with Kaiser.
Well, as you just pointed out, there wasn't really that many new characters. You got a few others, namely one of the 2 of the kids. I can never remember their names. Do you remember them?
I don't remember them, no.
Which one's Marceline?
No, Marceline was always there. They introduced some new characters.
I knew one of the names and I forgot.
Yeah. Who cares? Yeah. The main thing is, you got the 3 the new characters, which was Kadaj, Yazoo, and Loz.
Okay, so remember the names finally.
Yeah, I can remember them names. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have to cheat unlike you. But being serious, they're considered like the remnants of Genova, remnants of Sephiroth.
Yeah.
And you can definitely tell because each one has represents a different characteristic of Sephiroth. Like for example, Loz represents Sephiroth's immense strength and his it's sort of his emotional attachment to his mother, Genova, and Kadash sort of represents the ruthlessness and the effeminate hair.
I had a friend who would always go on about Kadash here. She's like, I want a boyfriend with Kadash here.
Good fucking luck with that.
I know. Yeah. She figured that out eventually as well.
But the point is, as new characters go, they were alright. I mean, the concept of being representations of different sides of Sephiroth was interesting. But I personally think it was focused on them a little too much.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have had them like focused like for the first half, and then sort of build it up towards Sephiroth coming back.
Yeah.
Because Sephiroth didn't really play as big a role as he should have done.
Hmm.
But that's just my opinion on that.
Definitely. I thought the new characters were brilliant, but I thought they really, if you're going to introduce them, I was expecting the final fight to be against Kadash.
Yeah.
I was expecting it to be really centered around them, and I think they. I hate the expression, but it fits as the definition there. They tried to have their cake and eat it. In that they tried to introduce newer enemies and then still have the old enemy appear. And I think that downplayed a lot of build up they did for the new characters.
Yeah.
You know, they're building up these new characters as somebody important. You had this nice trio, you could have a nice dynamic fight going on. And you could have involved some of the older characters and have a triple triad fight going on. It never went up to that.
No.
And this is one of its strong losses, I think, as a movie. As a sequel, we all want to see Sephiroth coming back and having the epic Sephiroth fight. And that's why it works, regardless. We had Sephiroth, everybody was happy. But there were these characters, and they were okay characters, and they just didn't do much with them. But what did you think of the new characters?
Looking back on them, they were interesting in the sense they represented Sephiroth, but maybe it was because I haven't watched it in a while. But I don't find them as memorable as Cloud, Tifa, and just the other ones. Like you said, they could have had like a trio fight.
Yeah.
I remembered Sephiroth's fight with Cloud a lot more. And we did have the group work of Avalanche, which made them more memorable because you had a sense of... It was a nice sense that they were working together, whereas if they fell apart at the end, I guess, with just Sephiroth appearing and...
Yeah. That's we'll get on to that question next. I think is talking about the older characters, and this is where I do think is the biggest misstep for this, and it goes a bit into the story side of it. But you're right. It falls apart where we don't get much of the older characters.
Yeah.
It's a nice setup for a great big fight involving a lot of the older characters. You get that with the Bahamut fight, and then all of the older characters are kind of forgotten. And the story kind of justifies that by suggesting that Cloud is the only one that really still had the skill that the other ones did. 2 years? 2 years makes you lose your skill in combat after defeating Sephiroth. It just didn't sit right.
No.
Yeah.
So getting into the question with a bit more teeth, do you think that they should have focused on the older characters more?
Well, I agree that they kept the main focus on Cloud and Cloud, because Sephiroth was not really a main central. He was central. He was central to the plot, but he wasn't. He didn't get enough screen time to really justify saying, "Oh, he was." They focused on him. They kept it solely on Cloud, which for the most part is fine. Because it is really about him. But I do think that the other characters like Tifa and Barrett as well, they did. They had their little moment in the spotlight, and they just all get brushed aside. I think they could have done more with them.
I remember Cloud and Tifa a lot more, and also Martin because she appeared with Tifa in that big dramatic fight, and then you only get snapshots of the other characters, and also with Kate Sith. The Moogle wasn't there, was he either? He was riding on Red, I believe.
Yeah.
Which was a bit strange looking back on the game, because we don't exactly then know what happened. Why is Kate Sith suddenly not the Kate Sith we know? I mean, the cat's still there.
Yeah.
He was quite funny and Scottish. But, what happened there? They never explained. I didn't know who Marceline was. She could have been Tifa's daughter for all I knew.
Yeah. I felt that the old characters had too much of a cameo sort of feel on them. They weren't particularly central, and it especially felt like a robbery because you had these new characters coming and they got all the screen time, but they weren't there for the whole story. They weren't there up until this point. Why are they getting the focus? Because the games were about Cloud, but it was always about Cloud in a group.
Yeah.
Cloud is part of the group. Cloud is interacting with the group. And then suddenly it's just Cloud with Tifa running support.
I seem to think that the only two characters that had more to do with the story were Tifa and Vincent. Tifa had the kind of like the emotional support you get with most characters for the protagonist as well.
Yeah.
And then you get Vincent in there, who has a bigger role than most of the other characters like Barrett and stuff, who are there just for like the fight. And then just say, oh no, we'll brush aside and let Cloud, have his fight with Sephiroth and stuff.
Also, Reno or Reno, however you want to say it. I also remember him because there was a funny moment with him where he nearly hits the other guy in the head with a pipe. That's how he was memorable, but the other characters, unless it was a big dramatic fight, and you don't really get.
I mean, it's one of those examples of why it's still a good sequel, but not a good movie. In that we got the Bahamut fight, we were able to see that Bahamut fight.
Yeah.
And we were able to see all the characters interacting with it. So it ticked the right boxes in not in a design by committee way, but it ticked the right boxes that it was enjoyable as a sequel. But as a movie, that is a really massive drawback. It was just cameo roles. They just decided, look, we'll have them fight a summon, and we'll have everybody get involved in the fight. 'Cause summons are big, let's have them work together. And then that's it for the cameo. A lot of those characters disappear, and these are really well-established characters.
Yeah.
And they disappear. We hardly see much of Sid. Vincent, in a way, works out the way I'd expect Vincent to work out. Always behind the scenes and whatnot. So I don't mind
giving out exposition.
But with him being an optional character in the game and then having more screen time than everyone else was a bit. You might not have even picked him up in the game. You might have forgot. A bit like Yuffie. I don't really remember Yuffie in it either.
Yuffie, again, quite a few of them only appear for that Bahamut fight, and then they just dip out of existence. And I did feel that as a movie, that was one of its biggest shortcomings, is that you had a lot of characters that you could really have built on, and you could have really used that connection. That's already it is partly established in the feel of the movie as well, and they didn't build on this, and that is a massive, massive shortcoming of it. So then, talking about shortcomings and whatnot, we go on to sort of looking at the story itself. So it's quite simple. It's just quite broad, but we'll dig into this a bit as we go along, because we've discussed some of the characters, so include some of that now, and just look at how was the story good, how was the story bad.
Right.
So, or where did it go wrong? So if we sort of dig into this now, what would we'll start with what the good. What do you think was good about this particular story, the narrative that they were telling in this movie?
They were focused. As I said, the story was focused heavily on Cloud, and I think you got this. The premise of it was it was obviously Kadaj and his group trying to resurrect Sephiroth, which was the main focus on that, and you also had the side story of the geostigma that's affecting like the kids, which I can't remember. Was that Kadaj's doing? Were they using the geostigma to their plan?
The geostigma was to the plan, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Cloud also had the virus as well, which is why he was fighting against it, I'm guessing.
The geostigma, I think, if I remember right, was connected to the live stream. It was basically like an overexposure to the live stream.
So that's basically the thing that opposes the live stream.
Well, no, it's a disease born of overexposure to the live stream specifically. Yes. That's why it was hitting Midgar the hardest,
right?
Yeah.
Because that was where the live stream coalesced to stop stop Meteor.
And then you got Cloud, who's basically just being him, sort of. Would you say he was neglecting his friends?
I think it's one of the big positives of the movie. It really starts out where I'd expect to see Cloud. He's just saved the world, but saving the world doesn't change him from his depression. He's lost things precious to him.
Yeah.
He's still got that sort of juxtaposition, not really knowing. He's a hero, but he doesn't feel the hero. He's still confused about all the past. He still has to deal with being essentially Zack, but not Zack.
Yeah.
So he's got all of these things weighing him down. He's exactly where you'd expect a man that has gone through all of that to be.
Plus the death of Aerith.
Yeah, Aerith on top. So you've got him exactly where you want him to be at the start of the movie. So I think that's within reason. But I don't want to continue that string at the moment, because that gets into where they went wrong. But where do you think they went right, Jessikyaa?
I mean, the connection with the characters throughout the story. Like, there were scenes where you could tell in the story that these characters were very closely connected, especially the scenes with Tifa just after Cloud leaves or enters. The way the story plays out from there, that worked quite well. It was an interesting story, but how important the side story was, I can't remember, opposing to reviving Genova and
Yeah.
Sephiroth.
Okay then. So then, where it went well, I think, and it's one of those things. If they focused, if they focused properly on the three new characters and made them proper villains, whatnot, then I think the movie would have been a lot better. And that would have been fine. So I think they made a good call in that sense, if they wanted to focus on them, having these three new characters. I like the idea of the geostigma sort of showing that, even after the world has been saved, there's still a lot of chaos to be dealt with. It's not just gone because Sephiroth is
That's
gone.
typical of Final Fantasy, though. There's always something that would potentially go wrong
But
with the
it's
world.
the thing though is it's also a very real thing. Just because you've killed the figurehead doesn't mean that you've stopped the damage that's caused. And I like that representation. So the story as it represents the world post Sephiroth is absolutely brilliant. And I did think that was a brilliant thing. It was also really good story-wise, showing that desperation. Even though there were kids that were desperate to be cured of this ailment, because they knew it would kill them. And they painted that sort of depressing sadness very well. These kids were just out for anything that would keep them alive, as any human would be. So sort of a more human story, it does do very well in telling that. And for that, I do have to give it some congratulations. It did very well in telling that story.
No, I agree. Yeah.
So then, if we go on to what did it do wrong?
Right.
Where
And
you
what
think
did it do
went
wrong?
I'll start with you.
Why do you start with me
We
for?
we do this in a round table. We do this in a very diplomatic way. So we'll start with you.
We're not
do you
very
think-
diplomatic though.
A round table around a square table.
Yeah.
Well,
But where did you think it went wrong, in your opinion?
Ooh, where did it go wrong? It's just, it's hard for me to debate this because it's probably the fan in me wants to defend it to all the to high heaven. But if I had to say what went wrong, it might have been was like the villains and stuff. It was like you said earlier, they were trying to focus, they're trying to make do something to complement both sides. They want new villains in there, but they want we want Sephiroth in there because that's who everyone wants to see.
Yeah.
You want to see, when you're going in this way, you want to see Sephiroth. That's who you're going to see. I don't care. Don't care what anyone says. You're going to go in there purely for that reason.
Yeah.
And they had too much focus on these new villains, which was fine. But the point is, I think you should have been one or the other. You should have either focused on the revival of Sephiroth, more properly.
Essentially,
More essentially, have a more dominant focus on him, or focus on these three new characters entirely.
Yeah.
Should have been focused on them, and I think that was a huge problem with it. It didn't know as it played out. It was getting more and more confused about what do we really want this to do. What sort of story do we really want to tell?
Yeah, it kind of falls apart. Definitely by the time they get to the Bahamut fight, you sort of see they put that in just to get that fight out.
Yeah.
It feels a bit sort of shoehorned.
It didn't really feel like there was much sense to that. It just felt like me when I first watched it, like, you're only throwing this in because you want an excuse for people to watch these guys fight Bahamut.
And again, it's a really good example of why it works as a sequel, because people just want to
yeah,
see a
it's
fight with a summon.
it's the only time we properly see the other characters, though.
Yeah.
You see them all working together.
Yeah.
And
But I do think half of the time you think it's just in there just for the fan service, just because they want to see it. I just don't see how is it supposed to really push
Tie
the
into the
story
story,
forward? Yeah, how does this really evolve it?
So where do you think it went wrong? Because you coming from a different perspective, you didn't have the Final Fantasy game, so
yeah.
Because we're looking at it from a movie perspective.
Well, from watching it before playing the game, the story, it was good when you've played it, but I never understood what were these characters doing, what was their connection. I mean, I understood that Tifa and Cloud is a connection because there's some love from Tifa to Cloud, let's be honest, that was clear. But then the other stuff, it was like, well, Sephiroth, what's he doing? Obviously he's a bad guy, they've got the new bad guys, but without knowing who Sephiroth was, you never see the connection with the bad guys and Sephiroth. You just know, oh, well, they're just trying to revive someone.
Yeah.
With not watching it in a while, it's probably a bit muddled in my head still.
Yeah.
Which is also not a good thing, as I can remember all the Final Fantasy games compared
But
to the
not-
movie a
yeah.
bit better. No fault to the movie, but if they'd have explained the story a bit better
Yeah.
and made it more of a movie and a sequel, so you understood a little bit more if you played the games, but you could still understand it quite well. I guess that was what it's trying to do a lot as well at the same time.
I think for me, and this is a bit overarching, where it went wrong was its story. It chose the wrong story to do what it wanted to do. It did what it wanted to do perfectly, which is why it's seen as a wonderful sequel to it. You know, it showed off all the characters, it showed off the fighting that you wanted to see, it showed off. But it went wrong with the package.
Yeah.
You know, as I said, it started off brilliant. It showed that Cloud was still in the mire and everything. And, you know, after defeating Sephiroth, I don't get the feeling that anything was changed. Cloud wasn't suddenly out of his depression.
No.
He suddenly had recovered.
If anything, you made it think like, maybe it's just gotten worse. You know?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think the story itself needed to change. They could still have the new villains, but I think a bit more of a story of them getting back together. You know, they'd have to have split into the different ways after the defeat of Sephiroth because there's so much stuff to repair.
Yeah.
But I think it'd have been a nice chance for them to sort of find a reason to get the gang back together and use that as a way to help Cloud recover.
Right.
In the face of maybe this new group coming up, or not even that, just have it, you know, they painted this nice picture of what the world looks like post Sephiroth. Have it them going around to try and fix stuff. So now they've done their immediate things for the immediate areas, but now they go around and look at other areas they haven't come to. Because Barrett would definitely have gone back to that small town outside of Midgar because he wants to sort that out. Each group would go off to their own way, and it's a chance to involve the Shinra people more because the Shinra could then jump in and say, oh, can you help us sort out some trouble here? It also allows you to do more of the fighting that they want to do because you could help out, and there's going to be still monsters going on. There's going to be old Shinra experiments and all free. You could get everything you wanted to get in there.
Yeah.
You could introduce a new summon, or you could find a convoluted way for Bahamut to be released in some situation. But ultimately, you end up with a story that involves the original cast so much more.
Do you think they went wrong with bringing Sephiroth back?
That's the other point. I think that is where they went horribly wrong.
Because that was literally the point of 7. Get rid of Sephiroth.
Yeah. I think it created this thought because it's one of those things. When they've got a particularly evil boss, I like the satisfaction of he's gone. And that is what the movie started out as. He is gone, everything's starting to recover. And by bringing him back, at least they brought him back quite failed and quite broken. But bringing him back, I think, was a major flaw. As a sequel, I was happy to see him come back. But as a story, I thought that was... Because I was sat there and it looked for a moment like they failed. As we'd expect, Sephiroth is dead. There's no way to bring him back. He's become part of the live stream. And in that respect, I'm like, okay, they failed. They've got back Genova, and look, no, Genova's head is broken, and it's all, fluids are flowing out. They've lost. Their entire plan has fallen apart. And I thought that would be an excellent point. If they wanted to keep that story, to have that sort of wrap-up, that all three get mad, you get a nice battle royale, and you get to see the sort of fighting you wanted to see with Sephiroth, without bringing Sephiroth back. Or have the Genova fluid empower Kadaj, so Kadaj is at Sephiroth's level, but ultimately not have Sephiroth come back. I think that was, doing the story they did, that was the major flaw in their story.
Yeah.
Having Sephiroth come back just broke apart all that satisfaction from the original. Even though, you know, from the sequel point of view, I was happy, yes, the fight with Sephiroth, and it was a really wonderful fight with Sephiroth. Best fight I've seen in ages, in anything. But that's one of its biggest flaws. You lost that satisfaction of having beaten Sephiroth, and it does sort of destroy the world's narrative quite a lot. Because, I mean, Sephiroth could come back. Well, what about Aerith? Why can't she come back?
Yeah, because that's
Turn
one
your Phoenix down.
That's one character with fan service was to
Yeah.
bring her back. I know she appeared as a kind of ghost spirit thing,
Yeah.
giving messages at the end, but
the
that
thing
wouldn't
is that
have been enough.
that's established as okay within the original Final Fantasy
Yeah,
series. We know
of
that the
course.
live stream has really close connections with the physical, so her coming back as the
as
live
well,
stream
we know that
incarnation.
Cloud is pretty messed up in the head anyway, and he sees stuff anyway, so seeing Aerith would be no problem. Seeing Zack as he did, no problem. His head isn't where it should be.
So I think if they wanted to go the story they went with, they needed to bring back Sephiroth in a figurative way. But I think to make it a much more coherent movie, and in some ways a more satisfying sequel, because it was a brilliant sequel. It did everything we wanted it to do, but it's been plenty of years and there's time to reflect. So you always see
It's been
things.
2 years. It was after.
No, but I mean, from when it's come out.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of time to reflect, and I think reflecting, it would have been a lot more satisfying if there weren't cameo roles from the other characters. Because I did feel it a bit in the back of my head. It felt a bit, I'd have wanted to see a bit more Sid, definitely wanted to see a bit more Vincent, Yuffie a bit more.
Even Red.
Red.
Because everybody's going to have different connections with each other.
Kate
So
Sif was quite funny.
I wanted to see more of the characters, and I wanted to see more of their involvement in the fights. And the other characters felt really, really weak compared to Cloud.
yeah,
It's like, these are characters I went up against Sephiroth with. These are characters we survived his destroy the entire solar system attack with. These guys should be really strong. But I got the impression, even against, someone appears and Barrett's shooting at it and it's doing nothing. I'd have expected the someone to at least felt it and turned his attention to him. It just felt like they were too powerless.
Because we'd expect to be like level 99 or whatever.
Yeah.
And they'd get overkills.
So I think focusing more on the core characters would have done the whole sequel a lot better. And if they did anything like this again, that would be the first thing I'd start looking for. Is a bit more of a focus on that. So it fell down at that as a movie.
I was going to ask you, moving on though, here's a question. What did you think about the performance-wise, the voice acting? I suppose you could only say that from the English dub as well.
The biggest problem I have with any voice acting is I've gotten so used to voice acting, and while I'm not good with languages in itself, I'm good at conglomerating memories. So when I watch the Japanese and read the English subtitles, the voices of the Japanese actors will actually be speaking in English in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard for me to remember the exact voice acting. But I never had too much of a problem with it. I felt that it was fairly well voice acted on all levels. I mean, you mentioned Kate Sith's Scottish. I thought
that was funny.
It was funny. He did have a weird accent in the game, if I remember right, so it fit.
Did they actually speak?
No, they didn't speak, but the actual writing showed he had a strange accent.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he was
And I think it worked.
puppet.
Yeah. So I think it worked having it. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't find a flaw with voice acting. Let's put it that way.
I think for the most part the English dub worked very well. I thought the actors they did get some very talented actors in. You got Steve Blum doing Vincent. I mean, that was pretty obvious, wasn't it? So, but I know that they did have some issues with one of them. I know. I personally didn't think it was a problem. I know Mina Savari, who played Aerith, apparently she got a bit of a mixed reception among fans.
I vaguely remember there being a throw up at that at the start. But this was a time I was still back in the Caribbean and I wasn't as clued in with the internet.
I personally didn't think, looking back, I was like, no, she did fine. I mean,
yeah.
So I didn't really see what the main problem was. I don't know if they thought maybe it wasn't too innocent enough. I mean, I'm not sure, but she was okay.
Jessica?
Yeah, I had no problem with it, and with no comparison to the actual game either. Unless you compare it to the Japanese, there's no problem. They fit the characters well enough. I never looked back from playing the game and went, well, that was completely wrong, you'd laugh and think, oh, look, I can imagine Kate Sith talking in Scottish now.
Yeah, I think it's probably why it works well as a sequel, because it gave voices to characters people wanted to hear voices.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it's one of those where probably nostalgia goggles takes things, because I can point out where it probably needs more involvement of the past characters, but with nostalgia goggles on, I just wanted to see Final Fantasy VII, this game I had really come to love, shown in a different format, and I got that ultimately, and that's where the sequel is very satisfying. It does exactly what it wants to do, but there are these shortfalls, and it's something that's good to have a narrative for. As Yahtzee would sometimes say, it's okay to like a game but say that it's flawed.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, I love playing this game, but it's really shit. Because it's being aware of what went wrong doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it.
That's true.
It just means that you're aware of where it went wrong. When you're discussing it with somebody else and you say, well, it's got these flaws, be mindful of it.
Well, nothing's ever going to be perfect, and whether people think it's that bad or not is up to them, but You're never gonna have the perfect game.
Yeah. So one of the other things that they tried to do, and they did quite well in my opinion in it, was representing the actual gameplay mechanics within the movie. So you have like the summon, you have the way they fight the summon, you have the way other creatures are involved when combat starts.
You had the motorbike as well.
Yeah, they tried to incorporate, I think, a lot of the iconic stuff about the game into the gameplay.
Yeah, because you remember the chase when you're in a van and you're against motorbikes, but then you actually... Oh no, Cloud actually had his own motorbike.
Yeah, and you're right on the street
just
in mid-gap.
seeing it in the film, it was so impressive with all like the swords and... Oh.
The bike was very nicely designed.
Yeah, but I like with that particular scene, I like the way that the creatures appear and disappear. So it's sort of it's a very iconic creature. It's that sort of leopard type creature, and they come in, and then when they get hit, they sort of puff away.
Well, that's what they do in the game anyway. There's no horrible bloody death.
Yeah,
it's
they
always...
just sort of fade.
And because they're part of the live stream, you'd expect things to just slowly fade away.
Yeah, so I did like it. It incorporated that sort of combat in sort of more realistic way.
Yeah,
and I think that was beautifully done. And the materia is another one. What do you guys think about the representation of materia?
I think that was like everything you said. They're pretty much just they are just throwbacks to the game. You know, it's sort of like again fan service to it. It's just making you think, oh yeah, there's the bike. Yeah, that even reminds you of you can see the chase. It just reminds you of that little chase scene in the game.
Yeah.
And the materia is just one of them. It's just a little throwback to the material you used in the game. And if I remember rightly, in the game it was the material you infused with your weapons and armor.
Yeah.
So it was definitely shown a lot more differently because in the film, Kadaj when he used it, he was still sort of absorbed it into his body.
Yeah.
So and I thought, well, that's an interesting different take. Rather than having it infused in your weapons, you infused it within your own body. You're infusing it with the power directly into yourself.
Yeah.
So it does make sense, though.
It does make sense in that regards. I think overall they are just nice little throwbacks to the game.
Size-wise, I felt that the material is a bit big, but in great big capital letters, but the material in the game is actually quite big.
Yeah.
You only see it when you pick up particular material and you actually get an idea for how big it is.
Yeah.
Because equally you get that funny material that Aerith drops when she dies, and that one's quite a small pearl. And that's all. There's a bit of a size issue there. But I think they didn't go terribly wrong on representing the size of it. But because they had them at that larger size, you couldn't slot them into these weapons.
No.
There was no way to properly slot them into the weapons. So it was a good call on them to do it. And it didn't subtract from that throwback to the combat.
Yeah.
Also, the way that they portrayed the casting of Bahamut, I really enjoyed. It really felt like a summon had been cast in the standard way. But what do you think about the fight with Bahamut?
Bahamut.
Bahamut, however you want to pronounce it.
I remember a lot of teamwork, which was nice. That's how I remembered the characters. And when you look back at the game, they are a group. They're not single people. Well, they were once, but now they're a group. They're Avalanche. They're working together, and that's what happened in the film, which was very nice.
The fight with Bahamut.
Bahamut.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Bahamut.
I don't think anybody on earth knows how to pronounce that.
Well, unless you watch it and actually hear any of them say it.
They still got it wrong.
Yeah. But their fight with Bahamut, Sin apparently, which is supposed to be his real name, Bahamut Sin, definitely was good and bad for two reasons. So the good part of it was the teamwork. You got everybody getting involved, getting their shots in, which is always good to see. You always get to see like the characters like Barrett doing what he does with his chain gun, with his chain gun attachment and stuff like that. You got Sid doing there with his spear and stuff. Yeah. And you got Vincent with his Cerberus gun.
Oh, that is epic gun. But that's because I played the Dirge itself. That was fun as hell.
Yeah. You all got that, so they're all getting their shots in, and it didn't feel like they're being challenged. Bahamut was a strong opponent, but then they sort of weakened that overall experience by having Cloud just say, "Yep, we're done. I'll kill it." It's like I'll go and finish it off. Yeah, it's like he's taking all the glory, even though you could see they're putting in the most effort for this.
That was again. It goes back to the stories. I felt that
They felt
the other characters
underpowered
felt
compared to
weak,
him. Yeah.
And I didn't quite buy the story's excuse of, oh, it's been 2 years, Claude is the only one that's maintained his strength. 2 years isn't, it's time to get rusty,
No.
but after 1 or 2 fights, they'd be badasses
It
again.
was a bit anticlimactic because the bit I remember is them all working together and it was really intense in that sense, and then just not getting anywhere was a bit. Why have it in there then and make it so good?
I think it was an okay call, again, all disagreements with Sephiroth being there. Having Cloud be the only one to fight Sephiroth felt right.
Yeah.
But having Cloud be the only one to fight everything felt wrong.
That was wrong.
It felt like it was a massive disservice to the other characters. And that I definitely felt when I first watched it. I was like, why are all the other characters
You think
so
they
weak?
would get a little victory of their own? It's like one noticeable one is when Tifa was fighting one of Kadash's with Loz, in the church.
Yeah, with Mark.
That was a good fight again, but she didn't beat him.
Yeah.
I remember.
No,
I think
Cloud had to come in.
he had to go in and save her, didn't he?
Yeah.
It was like, why couldn't you have let her have that victory?
Yeah. It just, but speaking of that, it's the most brilliant scene ever in anything.
It
like
was
that.
a brilliant
Yeah, it
fight,
was.
yeah.
The end of it. His phone rings.
But that's what they-
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
A little victory band there.
That was
But
so
that was something they
beautiful.
could have done. Is like, Cloud could have had the main victory over Sephiroth, and then like, why couldn't you have this dude with Bahamut?
I mean,
Why did they beat
The
him?
thing is, you definitely have these 3 new villains that have come in. It's a perfect chance to have the others show off their strengths.
Yeah.
And, we've beat around the bush quite a bit on this, but they did drop the ball massively on showing off the strength.
And to be fair, Cloud is dependent on other people. I mean, when you play the game, when you're with Sephiroth, you are pretty weak, and he is dependent on him. Sephiroth is his own battle. That's his battle. But every other battle in the game was all of them. And, everyone's strong enough independently, but they're stronger when they work together, not, I'm going to die, Cloud, save me. No, that's not how it works.
I was going to say, I think, if I recall, the only people that got a victory was Reno and Rude. I believe, didn't they sort of beat the Yazoo and Loz when they sort of had the bombs in the tunnel? They sort of tried to blow them up, didn't they, as Cloud was driving past? Did they actually get them?
I can't remember. I do know they played Reno and the Turks a bit as fools, which it works.
It works. They did have their
towards the end of the game, they were played by fools. I thought that was brilliant. I thought they could do with a bit more of it. They were a nice comedy thing. I thought.
A little nice. You had the comic relief somewhere, didn't you?
And I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Plus, they were the comic relief, but you still got this sort of badassery. They knew that they were going to get beaten up, but it was like Reno was just like, I don't give a damn. I'm still gonna try and beat you. And you got that sort of, I know I'm going to get beat up, so I'm just going to have some fun trying to be... you got that sort of light-hearted comedy, but without them being played for fools. They knew who they were up against. You knew they were strong, but you knew that the enemy was just that much more stronger. And that's what I liked about that one.
Well, that's who the Turks are. I mean, I thought they were massive jerks in the game, but...
Oh, they're really nice. They just follow orders.
Yeah, that's why I thought they were jerks.
They're real nice when you get to know them.
I know. It's just getting to know them.
Unless you're on Reno's bad side and then they get hit by a pipe.
So what's our next question then?
Well, I think we've ended up touching on it, but I think just it was supposed to be a wrap-up one, but we ended up sort of getting into it properly. Was the idea of the return of Sephiroth? But definitely discussing it before this point has been valuable and important. But
there was no denying Sephiroth wasn't. Looking back on it, Sephiroth was probably the most memorable part of the film.
Yeah,
there was no denying it because you're always gonna enjoy seeing him no matter what he's in. I
think ultimately he had to return.
He did, yeah, because this is where the argument was, it works good as a sequel, but doesn't work quite as well as a movie.
Yeah, because he had to return in one form or another. This is why I think at least empowering Kadash to Sephiroth's level, and then making 500,000 references to how he's like Sephiroth would have worked out better. But ultimately, you want to see that fight personified, that fight with a Sephiroth level enemy or Sephiroth himself. And that's, I think, why it's remembered as such a brilliant movie as a sequel, because people got what they wanted.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what the package was. They got a fight with Sephiroth that damaged buildings, that cut stuff in half. We got to see Cloud and Sephiroth at the epic level,
Yeah.
and that's ultimately why it worked.
Mm.
Could that have worked better as like a movie that just covered the end of Final Fantasy? Probably. It would fit a lot better story-wise.
Mm.
You know, it would felt a lot better if they were just covering the final battle between Cloud and Sephiroth instead of having it as him coming back. But yeah, I think because of what they wanted to do with this movie,
Yeah.
Sephiroth had to come back. Whether I wanted them to be doing that with the movie is another question.
Mm.
But that's why it worked out to me.
Yeah, I don't think he should have, because you'd beaten him in the game, and then, as you said earlier, it poses the question, why can't you bring Aerith back? Why is she just this ghost?
Yeah.
Why, she was really important in the game in a sense, but they cut her off so early. I think fan service wise, they brought back Sephiroth, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have liked maybe to see Aerith.
Yeah.
In some way or another, not as a ghost.
Yeah.
I remember the one thing I remember very solidly about Sephiroth was his voice actor, the English voice actor, George Newman.
Mm.
I thought personally he was one of the best actors, and I thought he was a perfect choice for Sephiroth. He just sounds, he does sound sinister to him, but he doesn't have that that overly sinister voice. Like, well, I'm the bad guy. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm sinister, but I believe I'm doing it for the right reasons, sort of thing.
Yeah.
You could definitely, it was just a brilliant casting choice for him, and you could definitely tell he was having a lot of fun doing with that role.
What do you think of the actual end? Because there's sort of the subtlety of Sephiroth lost because he was always on his own, whereas Cloud had friends, and that's what sort of pushes him to beyond Sephiroth. But they sort of embody that just by his weapon splitting into multiple weapons, and that is essentially what catches Sephiroth off guard.
Yeah.
He blocks the initial attack, and then suddenly Cloud's weapon splits to pieces and surrounds him. And he knows at that point he's lost. He cannot stop this attack from happening.
Yeah.
Or even with Sephiroth being weaker throughout the game, he had this massive hold over Cloud.
Yeah. Well, no. It's more this in that fight is established that sort of in essence, sort of subtly that Cloud won because he had friends. But what do you think of that end? Do you think it really did it justice? How it ended? Would you have preferred to see him actually have his friends get involved?
Possibly. I felt the way it ended was a little forced, because throughout the entire fight and throughout the game, you always get that impression. Sephiroth is better than Cloud. He's stronger. He's smarter. He has better battle sense than Cloud does.
Yeah.
And that definitely came off during the fight in the film. Sephiroth is. It did look like half the time he wasn't even trying. He was always keeping his cool, his calm. He's like, anything Cloud threw at him was like, yeah, I know how to counter this and throw it back at you. And then all you got is Cloud did this. He outsmarts him with the splitting of the weapons. I just felt like, that was just convenience there. I'm not sure if that was. I didn't get that sense that Cloud truly won.
Yeah.
I felt Sephiroth should have really won this fight.
Yeah, I do get that as well.
I'm a bit torn on the idea of his friends helping, because it would have been nice to see, but it is ultimately Cloud's battle.
Yeah.
It's always been Cloud versus Sephiroth, not Tifa and Red and Cloud.
Yeah.
It's always been Cloud.
Yeah, it should stay Cloud and Sephiroth. They did get that right. I just think they could have handled the finish a bit better.
I mean, again, it'd have been one I think would have been carried better if it was more on helping Cloud recover.
Yeah.
Because then it'd make a bit more sense. Well, why can he beat Sephiroth on his own now? Because we all played the game. We needed a team of 3 to beat Sephiroth.
Yeah.
Why is he now just capable of beating him? And I think if we had it sort of as recovery, so Cloud, was fighting Sephiroth as part of the team when he was still broken. But by the end of the movie, he gets, his friends have helped him to recover, and he has a better sense of purpose now, and then suddenly he has to fight Sephiroth. It would have carried a lot better.
Yeah.
The sort of idea that what Cloud has improved because he's got people behind him. I think it'd have been a bit more tangible. Again, something that would make it work better as a movie, but may or may not have made it work better as a sequel.
Yeah.
So I guess to conclude, you've got this undercurrent of this duality. That it's a movie, yes, but ultimately it was there as a sequel.
Yeah.
It was meant nearly entirely as fan service.
Mm.
So long as they ticked all the right boxes, it would complete its job as a fan service. And in that respect, Sephiroth had to come back.
Mm.
There's no doubt
And
about it.
Cloud had to beat him one way
Yeah.
or the other.
People wanted Sephiroth back, and it had to be a fight between Cloud and Sephiroth.
Yeah.
That's what people wanted to see, and I think, it's what made it happen. The Final Fantasy at that point hadn't really sort of continued any of its stories,
No.
and I think if they were going to continue it, they wouldn't want to start a new narrative. They wouldn't have at that point wanted to carry on the story. They'd have just wanted it as fan service, and in that respect, it did exactly what it wanted to do.
Yeah.
It gave us all the check boxes. But then looking back at sort of its position as a movie, they really needed to do a lot more. They needed to have a lot more care. They needed to make sure that they involved the other characters a lot more. Didn't make Cloud so central, or if you wanted to make Cloud central, make it central because you're trying to help him recover. I think that would have been a nice narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So people are focusing on because he was the figurehead of beating Sephiroth, so they feel compelled then to help him recover, because they might have gone off and recovered in their own way. Cloud was throughout the story uniquely influenced, had unique things that were making him more depressed, more prone to depression than any of the other characters. And I think having those characters then after the fight decide, look, he was the one that brought us through, we now need to put some work into helping him recover. I think that would have been a better story for everybody involved, fans and everything. It would have been one of those, if they went that route, it could be held up as a nice example of even the best of heroes need the help of people to recover.
Yeah.
So, it's that sort of idea that Superman's not infallible. There's going to be times when he gets depressed. And it's the same sort of thing. That definitely we could see at the end of Final Fantasy, the game, Cloud should have been suicidally depressive. Everything had fallen apart with him. He discovered all sorts of things about himself that he never wanted to know. That would lead to sort of soul-destroying sort of responses. Discovering that you're not yourself. You're actually just a collection of somebody else's memories. What would that do to you? How much would that make you question your own existence?
Indeed.
So he's got all of this weighing on his head. And I think if they centre the movie around helping him to recover, it show other people that, even figureheads are deserving of help. That figureheads will make a lot of mistakes. And starting it off with him sort of essentially abandoning everybody is another good starting point for that sort of narrative. That, figureheads, having done all of this wondrous stuff for humanity, will end up doing some dickish stuff.
Yeah.
Because they've had all that weight. They'd have all that soul-destroying responsibility.
Mm.
And it is for those that have been affected by those figureheads to help them recover.
Mm.
And you take that narrative to soldiers on the battlefield or to whoever you want to, but the story is still the same. That we should sort of band around those people who've helped us achieve what we want to achieve, because they would have sort of taken that burden. So it's advantageous. And I think that would have made it more than just the perfect sequel. It would make it the perfect movie.
Yeah.
It would be sort of, that is the perfect narrative. That is exactly what we want to have seen happen afterwards. Cloud, having been completely destroyed, then gets helped by all of these people who he helped to succeed, help him succeed. And then if you wanted to bring back Sephiroth, bringing back Sephiroth, I think would probably have been better if they did it more as a resistance of the live stream. Because then it'd fit canon a bit more. That Sephiroth is this really strong character. He's also not specifically part of that world's live stream. So there is the potential of him resisting the live stream and gaining some sort of physical form to
Well, he's a
fight.
child of Genova, basically.
Yeah. So it would have explained why Aerith couldn't come back, because Aerith is a proper part of the live stream.
Yeah.
So you can have a lot more about a narrative of the return, and then it explains a more sudden return of him
Yeah.
than you would have otherwise. So you can still get that sort of surprise, I'm back situation, but it still would fit better. And then it would also fit better as, why can Cloud now fight him on his own? Because Cloud has recovered.
Yeah.
He's no longer got this burden of who am I. His friends have established that it doesn't matter who you are from the past, you are who you were with us.
Yeah.
And that would help, from a social standpoint, that would help people to find somebody to identify with, because there's a lot of people out there that do a lot of good for people, that help people, help them recover from stuff, and then they feel abandoned. They feel that nobody can help them in the time, and that's somebody that can sit on and say, look, this is what I've done for you, like Cloud saved this world. Now can you do something for me? Can you help me?
Yeah.
So it's something that could have been a nice
Especially
addition.
since a lot of people do like Cloud.
Yeah.
He's one of these likeable characters.
So it's one of those that could have helped socially if they'd done the narrative that way. But again, hindsight is 2020, and I'm generally quite lenient on judging stuff based on what was understood at the time. And at the time, depression and just the general fan understanding what fandoms were and sort of how fans look and what particular fans are was a lot less understood. If they're making this in this day, 2013, 2014, then I'd be much harsher and say they really should have gone down this route. This is a perfect opportunity for them to help the fandoms, to give them something to look up to. But at the time, they were just looking to give the fans what they wanted, which was a bit more of the story, which was an embodiment of the game. And in that respect, they did absolutely brilliantly. But much more could be done, and I hope if they do another movie like this, that they do, if they do Final Fantasy X, that they do reflect on what they can do with the narrative, how they can change people's lives with the narratives, because these stories are... Final Fantasy is really good with the stories, and it's a good, unique chance for them to help people.
Yeah.
So yeah, is there anything else you guys want to wrap up with?
Well, no matter what its flaws were, it did push me to actually play the game, just because it was that good a film to find out what it was all about, really. So, no matter all its flaws, it's a great film. I'd say go watch it. You might even want to play 7 yourself if you haven't played it.
I think overall, to wrap this up, you have to... you got to judge it by how it appears, because the film seems to have this. The main problem is the identity crisis. It doesn't really know whether it wants to be a flat out sequel or a standalone movie. It's just, your enjoyment level is going to change depending on how you approach it. So, if you had to score this film, what would you give it?
Again, it'd be a duality one. If I was scoring it as a movie, a standalone movie, I'd give it a poor score.
Really?
Its story, it had a lot of potential based on its pedigree. Coming off of the Final Fantasy story, they could have done a lot more. As I mentioned, they could have done this brilliant emotional piece covering the damage that's been done by all of these discoveries during the... they could have covered depression and confusion and split personality even as well, because he's questioning whether he is himself or he's just a collection of these memories. So they could cover all of these mental issues, and also cover how outside influences can help people recover from these mental shocks.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I have to rate it really poorly.
Right.
They had all of this potential. They could have told a really, really in-depth story that doesn't have to be boring. It's already established they've got this sort of innate friendship, so it doesn't take much. Just some careful writing and some careful dialogue, and it's fine. People can understand that you have to help people recover. So in that sense, less than 5 probably.
About 5, yeah.
Yeah, but as a sequel, as a fan service, which is essentially, sometimes it's considered a bad thing. In this case, Final Fantasy, at that point, what it was doing wasn't giving any sort of fan service. No. So as a fan service piece, as literally a service to the fandom, to say you wanted to see this world personified, you wanted to see how the game would look in live action, here it is. In that sense, 8, 9 out of 10.
I'd say an 8 would be fair.
It definitely ranks really high. It ticked all the boxes. It could have done things better.
But it did get the main things what it wanted.
At the end of it, did I feel that I got a chance to meet all the characters and really get to know them? Yes. Did it make me happy that I saw a personification of all the fighting I'd done? Yes. Did it make me feel satisfied that I got to see the end of Sephiroth? Yes. So it did the job. Yeah. And it did it splendidly.
And one thing I do have to commend them for is, they took a big risk with this film, because they had you never really, you didn't see an actual sequel to Final Fantasy at the time. Well, they made 10-2 might have been just coming out. I can't remember what year. I think it was 2003.
I think 10-2 had just come out.
Yeah.
And then they tried it with this.
Yeah. But rather than do another game sequel, they tried a movie. It was quite puzzling at the time. You think, why would they do that? It's an interesting concept. It could either really work or it's just going to flat out fail.
Yeah.
So for them, that was a really big risk.
I think the thing is, as well, if it appeared during 10-2, the graphics had changed massively. It wouldn't be 7 it wouldn't be the same graphics, and that game was long. Let's be fair. Having a sequel to that game,
as a game,
it would probably have been longer than 10-2.
They did it right by making a movie, and as a fan service movie, it did exactly what it needed.
It definitely did.
As a movie, especially in this day and age, I'd have loved to have seen a lot more. Now that we have a better understanding of what the fans are like, that the fans are suffering from a lot of mental issues, that they've got a lot of social exclusion stuff, and this is all stuff that can be very easily, very realistically embodied by Cloud.
Yeah.
And it's a very good opportunity to show that. And if there's any fans out there that are thinking of doing this, of their own live action version of this, this is definitely a nice narrative to go down, because this is essentially what Final Fantasy VII ends up being about. Is this sort of, when you have government super soldier things, when you have all this experimenting with the world, it does cause irreparable damage. Whether it's in the physical world, in the case of the Maker reactors damaging the life stream, or within the people that it affects, people dying, Biggs and Wedge dying, all of these important people to the characters passing away. These are irreparable damages to these people. So it's a good narrative to go down. And it's something, if Square Enix continued it with something like 10, I'd like to see that at least reflected, what the damage was that was caused by the religious group at the time, because the narrative for 10 is a bit more light-hearted, but covering a bit more of that. So
would you like to see a 10-3 as a film?
I don't think it's as much. I don't think there's as much necessity, because 10-2 wrapped it up nicely.
Yeah.
So,
it'd probably be, again, it'd have to be one of those for pure fan service films.
Yeah, and the wrong kind of fan service.
Yeah.
10-2's anything but anyway, to wrap up, because we've hit the hour mark, and I think that's a good time to wrap up. So I think the general consensus is, as a film, it has, as we stated from the beginning, that it has its flaws, and we've gone through a lot of their flaws, and we've looked at it. But ultimately, we're all very happy to accept that it is a brilliant piece for what it does.
Yeah. It's the main thing is, when going into it, it has to be, how you approach it. Do you approach this as a sequel from as a fan, or do you just want to approach it as a standalone film?
It's a standalone film. You're not going to get.
So if you really want to enjoy this to its full potential, you're going to have to have played 7 first. And as much as they try to help you out with the reminiscent of Final Fantasy VII feature, you're not going to get anything out of it. You're going to have to replay the game,
or at least understand what happened, because without. I've had to play the game, so I wanted to know what happened. But without that,
I would suggest just reading the wiki at least, because the wikis, for all of their faults, and the wikis have issues and whatnot, it's a very good sort of recap, and I think it's that sort of level. Unless you want to spend the 30 hours or so playing the game that you need.
Only 30?
If you're really fast.
I don't think I could even do that with the walking in the game, let's be fair.
Anyway, unless you want to go through that, at least read the wiki so you've got a general idea of what's happening, and you lose a bit of the sort of the backing, but that's not too much of a problem in this movie. You're just there to see the fights.
Or at the very least, read fan fiction. I'm sure they'd get it accurate as well.
Do you want to read fan fiction?
No.
That's a topic. That's a topic for another day. So wrapping up, it's definitely a movie to go and see, but see it on the merits that it does well, and try not to judge it on the merits it doesn't do so well.
Yeah,
it is one of those that's a whole unique experience and well worth adding to your list. So that's it for this week, and we'll see you next week, where I think we're planning to look at an anime series, but that might change, as all of these things end up changing at some point.
We might actually. I think we will. Next week we will focus on anime series. We won't say which one yet, because until we got a better idea of what one we're actually going to pick.
Yeah, but we're going to be looking into that.
Yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed this session. I hope at least for some fans they get a bit of articulation for how they felt. If you've disagreed with us and you felt that certain points we've raised are wrong, then again, speak about it in the comments. Let us know, because this is something we can very easily bring up and have a little discussions, or have a response to you in the next video. Maybe at the start, sort of respond to the feedback. So
we'll just say me wrong. you idiots.
But ultimately, we do like to see the comments, and we do like having a chance to see what you guys think. And it's definitely, this is one that could potentially be polarizing, even though it hasn't been in the past. it could potentially be polarizing as you start to look into it a bit more deeply. Because most, as I said, worked as a fan service situation, so most people never look too deeply into it. But now that time has passed and we start to look a bit deeper into it, hindsight and everything, that lovely 2020 vision, there's a lot more discussion that could happen. So definitely leave comments in the comment section, comments on the actual podcast, and then comments on what was discussed as well.
And
Much
like and
appreciated.
subscribe to our channels to see more from us as well.
Oh,
Yes, you
it
do.
It is a good reminder. We all do quite unique channels. We all have our own unique spins. Hell, Kaiser Dragon, what is your channel mainly dedicated to?
My one's currently just focusing on Let's Plays at the moment. We're hoping to evolve them over time.
Okay, and Jessikyaa, your channel focuses on
Gaming. I'm meant to be doing some vlogging too and some unboxing, and there's going to be Final Fantasy unboxing as well. So yeah, if you like Final Fantasy, subscribe.
Get to it.
And I finally got mine up. I think I mentioned it in the last podcast, but it is up. It's Storm in a Teacup, and I don't really live up to my namesake yet, but I might start doing that at some point, maybe next year. Don't quote me on that one though.
Is that your New
But-
Year's resolution then?
No. But at the moment I'm doing sort of the more casual play games with discussions. I like to talk with my audience. I'm not too bothered how many fans I get, but just that chance to sort of sit and talk with whoever's listening. That's a nice feeling for me, and it's something that's going to keep me doing these videos. So I've focused on doing my videos like that. I'll also be doing some co-op games with the other members of Sphere and some other individuals we know, and these are much more jovial sort of. You just sit and watch us play and chat with each other. It's good fun. And on that topic, I've already done one with a friend of mine called Reaper Rie, and that's the Secret World, and that one is much more just this is us playing the game. So whatever your flavour is, go and check out our channels, get an idea of what it is, and definitely like and subscribe with the other channels as well if it's the content that you think you'll enjoy. And definitely comment, even if it's just it was a nice video or this video was crap. Comments do help us. Comments help us to guide what we do.
Don't think they've got the message, Tell them to comment further. I think
Yes.
they'll actually get it then.
Yes, make sure you comment.
And we will reply
Yes.
some point or another.
So we'll wrap it up there, and glad to have you with us, and hope you are with us next week. From the Sphere Group, this is
Hell, Kaiser Dragon.
Jessikyaa.
and Storm in a Teacup signing off.
Bye bye.